Welcome to another edition of Book Talk with Jordan and Stefan. Our book today is arguably one of the great classics of modern literature from one of the great writers of modern literature, and that is Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. Interesting how we came upon this. I am a huge fan of Henry Mancini, and Henry Mancini did the soundtrack. Well, he did the soundtrack for the Pink Panther, which is one of my all-time favorite soundtracks, which is why I'm such a fan of him. And by the way, yes, everybody knows the da-dun, da-dun part of the soundtrack, but you need to hear the whole thing. It's gorgeous. It's stunning. And it's a soundtrack I've listened to since I was 8 years old. I can remember coming home from school in 8th grade and age 8 and 2nd grade, and listening to that soundtrack for the first time, and it just blew my mind. So it's an amazing work. Anyway, well, of course, Henry Mancini also did the soundtrack for the movie adaptation of Breakfast at Tiffany's, Moon River being now a legendary song in the American Popular Songbook and everything. And so I woke up one day with Moon River stuck in my head, and it occurred to me that I had not read the book Breakfast at Tiffany's. And so it's I read the book, and it was fascinating. I think it's interesting. One very interesting comparison is between the original character of Holly Golightly and the character as she is portrayed by Audrey Hepburn, because it's one of those portrayals like Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal Lecter, where, yeah, it started from a work of literature, but that iconic portrayal, that iconic performance will forever be directly and specifically associated with that character. You know, it's just like they've had other people play Hannibal Lecter, but Anthony Hopkins is the one you associate with it. They've had other people play James Bond, but Sean Connery is the one you always associate with it. By the same token, I don't think they should remake Breakfast at Tiffany's, but if they ever did, whoever played Holly Golightly would never surpass Audrey Hepburn as that character. One of the reasons, though, that character is so iconic is that Audrey Hepburn was cast against type. If you read the original Breakfast at Tiffany's, you really start to think about how this character would have been better played by a Marilyn Monroe type, as opposed to Audrey Hepburn, who was more, Marilyn Monroe was very, she was very much like in a lot of ways, kind of more of a Paris Hilton type, although she's a better actress, but she was more of a Paris Hilton type personality than Audrey Hepburn, who's more of a Natalie Portman type personality. But that was the big question for me, was separating that iconic performance of Holly Golightly from the original text and trying to appreciate the original text on its own merit. So since I've been talking for a little bit, Stefan, why don't you do the plot summary for this?
It's about a gentleman writer in a apartment complex where he has a neighbor who is Holly, and she's a very capricious woman, and it's a story about all the men who desire her for one reason or another.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and it's every man in her life, in this woman's life. You know, Holly Golightly is. It's not overtly stated in the book. It's more implied, but she's a prostitute. A high-end escort. She charges men $50 to follow her into the powder room, as they put it in the book. And of course, what that actually means is that she's a high-end escort. And so she is. However, it's a study of it's a study of her. It's a character-driven study of her, but it's less about her than it is about all of the men in her life who have tried to, I don't want to say contain her, but tried to put a precise definition on who and what she is. And she resists that definition. She doesn't want to be confined. You know, she's been a wife to somebody and run away. She's been the client of an agent that wanted to make her famous in Hollywood, and she ran away from that. And she runs away from having any specific dimension to what she is. She's independent, but she's independent to a fault. She's forever running away from anything that could make her a deeper, more fully defined person. And it's funny because women like this exist. There are women out there who are stunningly, breathtakingly, achingly beautiful, and they just awaken this great that beauty and that charm and that grace awakens this just depth of romantic desire in the men all around them, and they lust after her. Their hearts yearn for her, but it's never for her. It's a projection of a feminine ideal that they're projecting onto her, and she forever runs from being identified by one of those ideals. And so it's an extraordinary. It's a very short story. I should emphasize, by the way, Breakfast at Tiffany's is typically packaged with 3 other stories by Truman Capote, House of Flowers, Diamond Guitar, and Christmas Memory. We certainly recommend those as well, but we're focusing specifically on Breakfast at Tiffany's for this discussion. So what were your feelings about it, Stefan? I was stunned. I was haunted by it. It was bittersweet. It was heartbreaking, but it was also morbidly fascinating and just one of the best character studies I've ever read.
It's beautiful. It's a charming little story about this girl who, can just bounce around. I don't think she has a plan in mind. She was just trying to get to that world, trying to get to that world at Tiffany's where she could just feel at ease and there's no one else bothering her, and she's just happy to be just herself. And we never get an understanding. We never get to see that woman who's just who is herself. She has no identity aside from what others gave her, and then she ended up taking on some of those.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it's totally believable. We understand how men are attracted to women on so many levels, and it's like here's this very idealized female that's pretty much uncapturable.
Yeah.
And she gets caught up in all the desires of other people around her, and that's it. That's the point. Yeah. And it's just this beautiful little story. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think he really does symbolism well. That was one of the things that kept coming back to me. It's kind of like, we all read Great Gatsby in high school, and we all were lectured at about how the the glasses on the billboard represent God watching everybody's debauchery and all that, and all the symbols in that book. And it's fair enough. It's a great book. This, I think, captures symbolism on a wonderfully subtle level. One of the men that's yearning after Holly Golightly is a photographer, and she's stringing him along. She's telling him, if you do this for me, I'll let you take those naked pictures of me and everything and all of that. And kind of, it's a carrot on a stick. She's manipulating him that way. But at the beginning, the way the story starts out, it begins several years in the future, where some of these men are the titular or the narrator among them are reconvening to discuss a possible sighting of Holly Golightly, and it began with that photographer, the Japanese photographer, saying, I've gotten pictures of Holly Golightly from she was in Africa, and I got pictures. This has to be her. Surely this is her. And it's like that's his way of getting the photographs. Finally, getting a fixed still image of her is his way of solidifying her, of saying, here she is. I got her. He's so triumphant that he got that picture, because just having the picture puts him head and shoulders above everybody else. One of the great.
It's the same. It's the same with the cage. It's such a you don't even think about it. You're like because she's you're trying to figure out why does he want the cage? He can't afford it. Why did she buy him the cage? Well, and you're just so focused on the actual scene. You step back and go, wait a second, it's a cage.
Yeah.
And she's saying stuff like, well, don't ever put anything in it. Don't. It's like, I don't want the cage. It's this beautiful little metaphor, and you're just not even paying attention to that because you're trying to figure this girl out. Like, what the hell is she doing?
Right. Well. And you're right. And what Stefan's referring to is that at one point the main character, the narrator, and Holly Golightly exchange gifts, and Holly Golightly's gift to the main character is this very nice, very ornate bird cage. And he doesn't have a bird. He doesn't have anything to put in it, but she gives him a bird cage. Just here's that, and so symbolic because it's saying, well, this is her idea of emotional connection. When she thinks of how do I express emotional connection with somebody, it's a cage. It's confining. So I'm giving you a bird cage that you don't need, just because that represents how I feel about you. And it's such a profound thing because she does care about him. She wants to care about him. She wants to have deeper feelings for him. She truly does. But she fundamentally views that as a cage, as a restriction. So that's what she gives him. And it's just the whole book is like that. It's like you say, it's a beautiful kind of tone poem about this person that so many people are so deeply invested in, and how she's running forever from that. So it's really there's not, I don't want to say there's not a lot to the plot. The plot is told in kind of a series of, the story is told in kind of a series of vignettes. And the actual story is very simple, so I don't want to give too much away about what all happens. But I would say, as far as do we recommend it? Well, Norman Mailer, on my copy of the book, Norman Mailer had this to say. He writes, Truman Capote is the most perfect writer of my generation. He writes the best sentences, word for word, rhythm upon rhythm. I wouldn't say the very best, but definitely one of the best. Certainly, that was my impression as well. It's beautifully written. It flows beautifully. I wholeheartedly recommend it. Stefan?
Oh, it's fantastic. You could read it in 2 sittings. It's a short story, not even a novella. It's just a beautiful take on. This is like the 1950s or 40s. It's really really back before we actually had these women, which are now more prevalent than ever in all major metropolitan cities. Really.
Oh God, yeah. Go to any EDM concert, and they're about 75% of the audience.
So yeah, no, this is a beautiful pick, and totally recommend it. Yeah.
Cool, super. All right, well, join us next time on Book Talk when our book will be 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson.